So we're going to go for French knots this week to start off with. So what I've got here is 6 ends of embroidery floss. I find using 6 ends gives a nice full French knot, as you can see on here in clusters. Lots of different ones there, so that's a good way to practice, is just do lots and lots and lots of them. But they can work in pearl cotton, in wool as well. If you do want a slightly smaller French knot, you could just use perhaps 2 or 3 or even 4 ends. You could play around with that if you're doing a sampler. So what I've just got here is one of the months of the year, April, that has some French knots there in the middle of these daisies here. So I'll come up where the dot's marked from the back there, and then they do just take a little bit of practice, French knots, but I often think when you've got quite a few in a cluster, if some are a little bit more loopy than others, I think that can look nice as well. So if you pull the thread through from the back, I have just knotted the back there, and we will go over different ways of how to start and finish our threads throughout the course as well. So I've pulled it through. I'm going to take my needle above the thread, and I'm going to wrap over the needle once and then twice. And then if I just carefully slide it down the needle, I don't want to pull it really tight around the needle, but also not really loopy either. So just so you can slide it down, and then you're going in just next to where you came out. And by sliding the thread down the needle before you pull it through, it helps it from unraveling. So I've wound it round, I've put my needle back in next to where I came out, and what I'm now doing is pushing the needle through those loops of thread. So if you pulled them too tight, what you'll find is you won't be able to get the eye of the needle to pop through the loops like I've just done there. Another tip to help with this is if you sort of just gently put your thumb of your other hand over the top, so it just helps pull the loop through like that as well. And then I'll come up and do another one. The one thing to just be careful of, if you have knotted your thread at the back, I'm just feeling the knot that I made, so it doesn't unthread. I'm pulling it out the way so that my needle doesn't go back through it and try to pull through. So I'll just go over that again. I'll go over once, twice, slide it down the needle slightly, go in next to where I came out, and then just push down, and then you just hear almost a pop of the thread going through the fabric and those loops, and just gently pull it through, and that's your French knots. We'll have a look now at the lazy daisy stitch that comes up a lot around for the petals, and then also for the leaves on quite a lot of the designs as well. So what you might like to do on a sampler is try doing a lazy daisy with 6 ends of embroidery floss, or perhaps I'll do one as well that gives a slightly crisper look in 2 or 3 ends of embroidery floss. Pearl cotton is quite good as well for doing lazy daisy, because it's sort of a thread that doesn't separate like the embroidery floss does here, and it stays together. That can give quite nice crisp lazy daisy stitches as well. So for the lazy daisy, I've come up from the back, and if I sort of loop it, sort of going up and hold it with my thumb there, I'm going to go back in where I came out. So again, if you have started with a knot, when you put the needle in, just make sure that the knot behind's not in your way for your needle to go back through it and get stuck. So I can go back in there. If you find it easy, you can go just right next to it or in the same hole. So I'm going through where I've just come out and just coming out about 1/2 centimetre away. And then I'm just going to wrap my thread around the back, push it through, give that a pull, and then just gently pull that through, because if you pull it too tight, you do find that you lose the shape of the sort of lazy daisy stitch. And then we just take the thread over that loop and back down through the fabric, so it anchors that loop in place. And in lots of vintage embroidery designs, the French knots and lazy daisies do go in hand with the sort of lazy daisies clustered around those French knots. So that's one there in the 6 ends of embroidery floss, and this one here is just in the 2. So again, I come up from the back, go back in, push my needle out and wrap my thread round the back. Got caught on the screw there. Pull that through, and again, not too tight, and then just take it down and anchor that in place. And then if you are doing it in a sort of floral, chances are you'll just keep working them round a circle shape. So just go over that again. I've come up, back in, stitch length along, wrap the thread behind, give that a pull, and then take the needle through to the back. Depending on where you are using them, you can do, so I do that sort of on average about 1/2 centimetre length, but you could play around with doing them even longer if it suits the design. So I've done more like 1 centimetre there, and then taking the thread over, depending on the size of your leaf. So you've got a more elongated teardrop shape there. So that's your lazy daisy. So I'm just going to do the chain stitch here on a line that I've marked out, but this would be good for your lettering of the months, or for stems of the various flowers as well. So I'm starting here at this side of the line, and I'm going to come back in to that hole, same way as we start a lazy daisy stitch. Come along about 1/2 centimetre, wrap the thread behind and push my needle through, and then pull there. Now with the lazy daisy, we just took the thread over, but because we're doing a continuous line now, we're not going to do that until the very end. So now I'm going to come back into that hole that I've just come out of, again 1/2 centimetre along, wrap the thread behind, and then back in 1/2 centimetre along, wrap the thread behind, push my needle through. Again, a chain stitch with 6 ends, you don't get such the definition of the chain, you get more of a solid line. So you might want to try it in both. So keep pulling along there. So keep going back in that hole, coming out, wrap the thread around the back of the needle and pull it through. Oops, too far along. Like that until you get to the end where you're going to, and then you just take it as you finish a lazy daisy stitch, just take the thread over and anchor that down. The other thing that might be nice with the chain stitch is to actually fill in things like leaves as well. So the chain stitch can be a filling stitch as well. So what you could do is, if you've got a little leaf shape, those of you that have done the visible mending will have tried chain stitch as a filling stitch as well. So now what I could do is go along the edge of one of my leaves with the chain stitch. So wrapping the thread behind. It doesn't matter whether you wrap left or the right. The edge of my leaf there, anchor it down, and then I'm just going to work another chain stitch along right next to that one, so it becomes more of a filling stitch, like that. So that could always be an alternative to the satin stitch for filling in some of your leaves. Just gives more of a textured filling stitch rather than the smooth satin stitch. So get to the end there, anchor my chain stitch down, and then carry on working the other way until your leaf or petal is filled in. So like that. So we've got chain stitch as a filling stitch, as a line, and then lazy daisy, which is also known as a detached chain stitch. So just a little chain stitch on its own for little petals and small little leaves. Chain stitch as the line, and then as a filling stitch there.